All right, folks, welcome back to the channel. You found us here at KGB Customs, home of some of the best custom gun content on the web. We share these custom guns in hopes of sharing some knowledge and to catalog some of the great pieces that come through our shop. Thanks for joining us. Today, we've got a neat blast from the past, the not so distant past, the 90s. We saw a lot of upheaval and innovation in the 90s in competitive pistols, largely in that the decade prior, most actually competitive semi-automatic pistols had to be heavily customized, and you couldn't just order one from a catalog and have a gun ready to run in a competition. We had Bill Wilson's shop starting to build towards the later half of the 90s some more practical pistols that were ready to go out of the box for IPSC and IDPA. Kimber, of course, introduced their pistols to much applause. They were high feature set pistols, meaning they had a lot of features that a stock Colt didn't or a stock Springfield didn't, and would get you by, especially at local match levels, to get your feet wet in the competition game. Also, other companies took note of this. We saw companies like Ed Brown, Les Bear, and John Nolan's company, Nowlin Arms, start rolling out some sort of, custom guns, sure, but they were kind of ready-made competition guns. They had fairly limited options. They made a few basic models. This one is known as the Match Classic. The Match Classic would have been a classic 5-inch gun, generally with adjustable sights like you see on this gun. I have seen some with fixed rear sights. Probably was an option at the time. This pistol was built at Nolan's shop in '98. The interesting thing about it, other than it being a nice custom pistol, is that it's chambered in the 9x23 Winchester. 9x23 Winchester is not something you're going to run down to your Walmart and buy ammo for these days. I'm not sure that it ever was. Of course, I wasn't buying much pistol ammo in the 90s, so I can't speak to that entirely. But the 9x23 came about just before this gun was built in 1996. Winchester announced it at the NRA convention in 1996. It differed from the 38 Super in that it was not a semi-rimmed case, so it was a rimless case, which aided in feeding and reliability. And the two cartridges operated at very different power curves. The 38 Super pretty much maxed out at 36,500 PSI of case pressure that it would handle. 38 Super would attain major power factor by doing that. But it was hard on cases, very hard on cases. And the 9x23 solved that by using a much thicker case down in the bottom that would withstand 55,000 PSI. We're getting up into rifle pressures at that point. Do I advise hammering 55,000 PSI rounds through a semi-automatic handgun in front of your face? Not as a regular habit. But the gun was very reliable. The cartridge length was right there in line with a 45 ACP. You could feed them out of 38 Super magazine. This gun also does have a Colt 9x23 marked magazine, which is no different than Colt's 38 Super mags, other than the marking on the bottom. Interesting side note, this gun came in, I did test fire it. I didn't have any 9x23 ammo, so I test fired it with 38 Super, and the gun ran it fine. Naturally, the brass just kind of dribbled out because of the anemic round compared to what the gun was set up to run. But you can spring these guns to shoot standard box 38 Super in, and a lot of guys do. I got a little quote here from Cameron Hopkins, who was there in the 90s when this all happened. And he, interestingly enough, wrote a post today that I'm going to quote here. Colt chambered the 9x23 Winchester after Winchester introduced the cartridge, but there, in quotes, 9x23 was in fact a direct and exact copy of John Rocco's 9x23 Super. John owned CP bullets and took out a patent, lists the U.S. patent, on his improved version of the 38 Super. He went to Winchester to ask for a quote in making brass for him, and those snakes figured this Pennsylvania pipsqueak wouldn't have the resources to go against the mighty Olin Corporation. So they flagrantly ripped off his cartridge, after telling him no, they would not have the production time to make him brass. Shortly thereafter, Winchester announced their new 9x23 and Colt chambered a gun for it. However, those conniving suits at Olin misjudged Mr. Rico, and he sued. 7 years later, John won, and Winchester had to pay him for knowingly infringing on his patent, which by law is triple damages. That's just a fun little side note. Like I said, from Cam Hopkins, former editor of American Handgunner. He was there when all this was happening and has seen a lot of changes in the industry in his decades of time in it. Now he operates Supervel ammunition, and so he's well in tune with the makers and the shakers in the ammo business. So this gun, well-appointed pistol, comes nicely laid out with all of its paperwork, which we don't see too often. We've got an original invoice from Nowlin. This was not a cheap gun in its day. Late 90s, this gun cost this gentleman, after all of his fees and everything to get it to California, he had just under $2,000 in this pistol in 1998, which would buy you just about any pistol you wanted at the time. This gun, feature-wise, is, like I said, nicely laid out. We've got a fully beveled mag well, finely checkered 30 LPI front strap. I believe those were machine checkered. I don't know for certain. I've had a few Nowlins in, and seems to me that the ones on their frames, which this is, the frame is marked Nowlin Manufacturing, Claremore, Oklahoma. The ones on their frames are machine checkered. This frame may be familiar to some in the grip safety. The frame is likely a CMC Products Chip McCormick frame, which there was some crossover with him and Kimber and Bull Armament back in the day, and that's likely this frame was made for Nowlin on a variance. Up here on the slide, we see the American Pistolsmith Guild crest. John Nowlin, I believe both senior and junior, were proud members and supporters of the American Pistolsmith Guild, and proudly marked the gun with their crest. The rear sight is a fully adjustable unit, this one made by Caspian in the LPA pattern. The front sight's dovetailed in what looks to be a Heine dovetail. Of course, we've got the Nowlin match barrel marked Nowlin 9x23. Nowlins were kind of known for having a longer tube. Their barrels would stick out past the bushing a good bit, and that's pretty normal for those. Made them kind of distinct. Gun has front cocking serrations like most gamers would have wanted at the time, and largely the best quality parts you could get in the day. Of course, the ignition parts are all Nowlin's parts. The barrel is a Nowlin part, bushing, pretty much all the internals. The slide stop is a machine piece. I believe the thumb safety and grip safety are cast, which is normal for that time period. That was pretty much the best parts you could get at the time, and far better than the older cast parts. A little bit about John Nowlin and his company. John Nowlin Sr. was born in 1935, became a renowned pistolsmith, and manufactured specialized parts for the 1911 pistol platform. Based in Oklahoma, his career in firearms began as a competitive shooter. That's a story we hear quite a bit. Pretty much all the greats of the 80s and 90s started in the competition sphere, whether they needed their own guns to run and they learned how to fix them by themselves, or they were doing work for locals who demanded, high quality competition work done. By the early 80s, Nowlin was already building custom competition pistols. His passion for excellence, combined with his family's involvement in competitive shooting including events like USPSA, Bianchi Cup, IDPA at local, national, and world levels, drove the success of his custom shop, particularly in the 90s, and he supplied products to multiple champions, national and world champions were running his parts. Probably his biggest innovation was his barrels. He developed an ECM electrocathode machine barrel, which was unlike any barrel that had been on the market prior. The barrels tend to run very tight on the bore. I can speak to this as I have a Nowlin barrel in my carry gun. It's a 45, but you have to buy a special barrel chamber reamer to ream these barrels because the bores are so tight. And my carry gun, at least, won't shoot. I shouldn't say won't shoot. It'll shoot them, and it shoots them quite well for 20 or 30 rounds. But it does not enjoy digesting standard 451, 452 cast bullets. You have to go down in size. And I've actually just, after shooting Nosler's 185 hollow points for practice bullets, I really haven't gone and looked for any custom-sized cast bullets. The Nosler 185 is very similar to the Zero bullet, and they just shoot beautifully and, of course, don't cause any leading. But the Nowlin barrels have a very straight, very even bore because of this barrel making process, and that's really what Nowlin's probably best made for. He was an honored member of the Pistolsmith Guild and mentored many prominent figures in the shooting world. In the early 90s, he expanded his operation by hiring a couple additional gunsmiths and shooters for his team. And that's where these guns came in, these house-made guns. You'll see some Nowlin marked Colts out there, but a lot of the Nowlins you run into will be on Nowlin marked frames like this gun. Family was really big in the business. His family still runs the shop. John Nowlin Sr. and John Nowlin Jr. have passed away, although they both ran the shop for a time. The company is now owned by his oldest daughter and her husband. Both of them are law enforcement officers with decades of experience behind a gun. Nowlin continues to produce 1911 components. They stopped producing guns and doing custom gun work in 2010, which was about 14 years before John Nowlin Jr. passed away, and about 8 years after John Nowlin Sr. passed away. But the shop remains active. They continue to support the industry and offer American-made parts for 1911 pistols, machined from bar stock and made of quality steel. I wouldn't hesitate to use their parts today. I've used a few of their hammers and a few of their barrels through the years. As I said, with their barrels, if you're shooting cast bullets or your intention is to shoot cast bullets, I would maybe reconsider. But I have been told by gentlemen who size their own cast bullets that once you get the size just right, they are beautiful shooters. And that's no surprise because of how consistent the gun is with other bullets. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and maybe learned something about Nowlin and 9x23. We appreciate you all tuning in. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Please share it with your gun friends. We've seen some great growth here in the last couple months, and I'd like to keep it going. Thank you.